for joining us tonight on another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I'm your host for this fabulous little half hour where we are going to talk all things motorsports, and you won't want to miss a single second of today's show because we've got all the latest news and notes from the NASCAR antitrust trial that began on Monday. We also have news and notes in the world of Formula One, as we've now got a three-way battle for the championship going into the final race this weekend at Abu Dhabi. And speaking of championships, we have controversy in the world of supercars, which almost every NASCAR fan could have told you was going to happen with this new finals program that they've got to determine their champion. And let me tell you something, you won't want to miss my thoughts on that coming up later on in the show, because it is a very interesting thing to behold how that championship went down. But before we go ahead and get into some of the major news and notes of this week, we want to remind you, if you like this show, please do follow me on social media. You can do so by looking up at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS33. And then make sure you have the WTHR Plus app installed on your smart TV so you get brand new episodes of the Racing Report each and every week. We record a show every single week, and we're going to continue to do that at least as long as this NASCAR lawsuit is playing out, and because you're going to need to be updated on that. And also, it's important to note that we're recording this show on Wednesday, December 3rd, so some of the news and notes you might be hearing from the lawsuit that comes out on Thursday or Friday probably won't be included or covered until next week's show. That's another reason why you got to stick with the Racing Report each and every week. So make sure that WTHR Plus app is installed on your smart TV. And now let's go ahead and jump right on into the news and notes of the week in the world of motorsports. We'll start off, as always, in the world of Formula One, and Red Bull has finally announced their 2026 driver lineups for this upcoming season. They've announced that Isaac Hadjar will be promoted from the Visa Cash App RB team to the main Red Bull team to pair alongside Max Verstappen beginning next season. And then they've also called up Red Bull Jr. Arvid Lindblad to pair alongside Liam Lawson at the RB team beginning next season. Yuki Tsunoda, of course, he's on the, unfortunately, the odd man out in this situation, but he's not going far because Red Bull says that he will remain with the team as their reserve and test driver. So Yuki Tsunoda not going to be driving full-time in Formula One next season, but definitely still has a lot of opportunities and options in front of him, given his Honda connections. I'm not saying IndyCar, but I might be saying a possibility. Look at it. I don't know. There's only one team remaining left, so we'll just have to see. Again, not really anticipating something like that, but who knows where he could land. Could be a sports car program for him out there, I'm sure of it. But definitely interesting to see that Red Bull going again with another rookie pairing. Not really rookie pairing, but another pairing alongside Max Verstappen with a non-veteran driver, at least Isaac Hadjar, having a full season now of Formula One under his belt. Is he ready to move up into the big F1, a big Red Bull team? That's to be seen. Usually it doesn't seem to be going well the last several times Red Bull has tried it, sans Sergio Perez. But who knows? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see coming up here next week. Obviously, Hadjar has indeed impressed quite a bit in his tenure with the RB team. But again, so did Tsunoda, and Lawson has relatively done better since his demotion. Who knows? Just be interesting to watch there. Meanwhile, the Cadillac F1 team has announced that they will launch their livery for their inaugural season in Formula One during the Super Bowl coming up here on February 8th. So if you were watching the Super Bowl for, I don't know, football reasons, now you have another reason, because you'll get to be one of the first people to see Cadillac F1's livery that they will compete in their inaugural season in Formula One. Now let's also talk about newly crowned Formula 2 champion Leonardo Fornaroli. He has joined McLaren as a test and development driver, and this comes literally just days after he won the Formula 2 title. We'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show. Speaking of cars being launched, we know the launch date for Aston Martin. They will launch their 2026 F1 Challenger, the AMR 26, on February 9th, so just one day after after the Cadillac F1 unveils their livery. I don't think we're going to see the actual car that Cadillac F1 is going to race, but we should see, at the very least, Adrian Newey's first ever Aston Martin design car coming up here on February 9th. Now let's go ahead. Let's talk more legal drama. This time in the world of Formula One. No, it doesn't have to do with Felipe Massa and Crashgate like last week we talked about. No, instead, if you remember, German media is reporting that ex-F1 driver Adrian Sutil has been arrested and accused of fraud. Now, very minimal details are being released so far, but this is what German media has reported, is that investigators suspect that Sutil committed, quote, aggravated joint fraud and joint embezzlement, unquote. Again, these are just allegations as of right now, and this is all coming from German media, so it's being translated by other racing media at this point. So we don't really exactly know what Sutil is being is really under investigation for, other than the blanket statement that they say aggravated joint fraud and joint embezzlement. So some sort of money stealing going on here, but definitely if we hear any more updates on that, we'll be sure to bring them to you right here on the Racing Report. So like I said, don't want to miss an episode. All right, let's go ahead and close the book so far this week on Formula One news. We're not done talking about Formula One. We will have plenty more to discuss in the world of Formula One coming up later on in the show. But for now, we do have to get to some IndyCar news, because Juncos Hollinger Racing has confirmed that Stingray Rob will return to the team in 2026 to pair alongside Rinus VeeKay. Now this, like I said, leaves just the second Dale Coyne car yet to be confirmed for the 2026 grid. And again, Dale Coyne said they wanted to have that locked down by Halloween. Then they said they wanted to have it locked down by Thanksgiving. Well, now both Halloween and Thanksgiving have passed, and if they don't have something coming up here by Christmas, I'll be very surprised, as Christmas is just coming up here in a couple of weeks' time, and that's the next, I believe, that's the next time frame that Dale Coyne mentioned, that they have to get something announced, something put together here. So the question then becomes, who is going to get that second Dale Coyne seat? Who's going to bring the money and the funding in order to have enough preparation in the offseason to get ready for March 1st when the IndyCar series comes back at St. Petersburg? Again, very interesting to see how that plays out, but at the very least we do know that Stingray Rob is sticking around for another season. But I think that was pretty much all but confirmed. He did have a 2-year contract, at least as I understand, with Juncos Hollinger, so I believe they were always planning on bringing him back. It's just that they've now decided to confirm that yes, he is indeed racing again in 2026 with the team. Now let's talk about some good news in the world of IndyCar. Good Ranchers, a longtime sponsor there of Scott McLaughlin the last couple of seasons, they have announced that they will serve as the title sponsor of IndyCar's return to Phoenix Raceway, and the race on March 7th will become known as the Good Ranchers 250. So at least we know it'll be a 250 kilometer race around or maybe mile. I don't know. Maybe it could be, I would imagine maybe mile, probably, right? They use kilometers primarily to do the 500 lappers in NASCAR, but maybe this will be a 250 miler. That'd be fun. But anyway, at the very least, we know that race has a title sponsor, which is always a good sign when you're going to a new race or a venue. Final piece of IndyCar news. It's not really IndyCar news, but it does have to do with an IndyCar driver. Will Power will make his debut in the Rolex 24 at Daytona coming up next month, driving for Kenny Habel's 75 Express team, and he'll be joined by newly crowned Supercars champion Chaz Mostert, as well as veteran Mauro Engel, who, if you recall, has had lots of sports car experience and even did a stint in Formula E several years ago. So a good lineup there, and that'll be in the GTD Pro class, so be looking for that coming up here. It'll be a lot of fun. Good for Will Power finally getting to go race the Daytona 24. He was scheduled to do so in 2023, but due to an illness with his wife Liz, he was not able to compete, but now he should be able to compete for a Rolex 24 coming up here in a month's time. So with that said, let's go ahead and take our first break of the show, because when we come back, we've got a lot of Supercars news to break down, and then we're going to break down the first 3 days of the NASCAR antitrust trial and give you some of the key points that you need to know when following this case all the way through for however long it lasts, because At this point, who knows? We've only got through about three testimonies so far in this first 3 days, so we'll see how long that lasts. But don't go anywhere. More Racing Report coming up after this. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks so much for sticking with us through the break. Let's go ahead and break down the news and notes in the world of supercars because they did crown their newest champion this past weekend. We'll talk about that coming up here later on in the show. But first and foremost, on the news front, we know that after being replaced by newly crowned Super 2 champion Rylan Gray won the Super 2 championship this past weekend. Just wanted to get that in there. He's moving to Dick Johnson Racing next season, replacing Will Davison, who has now announced that he is going to join the Grove Racing team as their new co-driver. And so that's huge news because that follows the retirement announcement from Garth Tander, who recently actually won the Bathurst 1000 again. He's got tons of those. I don't want to guess. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I should probably know, but he's got a lot of Bathurst 1000 victories, and now he's got another one as a co-driver coming most recently earlier in October with Matt Payne. And so now it's expected. It hasn't been confirmed. We just know that Davison is going to be in a co-driver role with Grove Racing next year. We don't exactly know who he's going to be paired with, but it is expected and rumored that he will join Matt Payne as well to essentially replace Garth Tander, who, like I said a couple weeks ago, has officially retired from Supercars Racing. He's on the broadcasts now and just enjoying retirement. So that's some good news there, at least. I know it's still a bummer that Will Davison's full-time career kind of came to an abrupt end after Dick Johnson Racing announced his replacement so soon before the end of the season without really, it seemed, any major knowledge that it was a big shock, at least to me. I didn't expect it, but that's where he's landing coming up next season, so you'll still be able to see him race, at least during the endurance races. Now let's talk about some of the news from the Adelaide Grand Final that was this weekend. Organizers with the race say that the 2025 edition saw 285,700 fans attend across the 3 days of the racing event, making it the most attended event at the Adelaide Street Circuit since 2015. Now, there's even more good news for the Adelaide Grand Final. Meanwhile, Supercars has announced that Adelaide will continue to host the Grand Final through the 2034 season. So that's a huge deal. I mean, that's basically 12 years, or not 12 years, but that's basically almost 10 years more, 9 years, I guess, coming up here that they will be hosting that Grand Final. I had to just get my math right there. Sorry. This is when you're doing it all in one take. You got to do your math on your head, and sometimes you add when you're supposed to subtract, and you're thinking about other things. Forgive me. 9 years. But that's good news for everybody down there in Adelaide, because that was a big event. It looked like fans were very much excited for that. So we'll see if that kind of momentum continues even after what we're about to talk about coming up here after the break. What some of the fallout was with the new finals format. But before we get to that, we got to talk about NASCAR news, because we do need to break down everything that happened in the first 3 days of this antitrust trial. So, like I said, the trial between Front Row Motorsports at 2311 against NASCAR began Monday with jury selection, and as of the recording of this episode, we have seen testimony from Denny Hamlin, NASCAR Executive Vice President Scott Prime, and Front Row Motorsports owner Bob Jenkins. Here are some of the main takeaways from the first 3 days of testimony, and I'll go through them here with you right now. So, first of all, Denny Hamlin testified that 2311 paid $4.7 million for its first charter. So that was the charter for the car number 23 that started the whole team back in 2021 when they bring in Bubba Wallace in. And then when they expanded to 2 cars for the 2022 season, bringing in Kurt Busch, they paid $13.5 million for that charter. Now, at the conclusion of the 2023 season 2024 season moving into the 2025 season, they paid $28 million for the charter that is now used for Riley Herbst. And so that was some of the big first news that we got from Denny Hamlin testifying how much money 2311 spent on these charters and just how much their value has gone up in just 4 short years. Very interesting to see some of those notes there. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Kessler contended in his opening statement. Jeffrey Kessler, if you're not familiar or you don't remember, he is the lawyer representing 2311 and FRM. He said in his opening statement that NASCAR had used its power to depress prices paid to race teams and that teams were hurt by the excise of that power. Now, NASCAR's lawyer countered by saying that the original charter agreement gave previously unavailable benefits to NASCAR teams. So you have, those are the two opening statements. Now, it's important to note that Judge Kenneth Bell, who is presiding over this entire trial, has not exactly been too happy with the lawyers on both sides of NASCAR. Now, if I can pull this up here for a hot minute, and if you'll forgive me for the terrible use of television that you are about to see. But it is very important to note that Judge Bell is not exactly happy with the way these two are going about it. So according to Bob Pockrass, at the end of the third day of the trial, he tweets that court was done for the day after Bob Jenkins' testimony, and it will continue into Thursday. The judge admonished NASCAR attorneys for 2 violations of evidentiary orders and said any additional violations will result in significant consequences. So we do have that to take a look at. In terms of just where this is going, it has gotten very contentious on both sides, both the NASCAR side and the 2311 side, when it comes to court proceedings. We'll say that. Meanwhile, let's talk about here on day 2 of the trial, Denny Hamlin, who continued his testimony, testified that he makes $14 million annually driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, this seems like a big number because that puts him on par with how much Formula One drivers get paid, which was a very interesting graphic that I saw over the last couple of days. Very interesting to note there that that's how much he's getting paid, especially given the fact that NASCAR drivers typically don't get paid at all, let alone $14 million a year. But again, he's part from the era of NASCAR where you did get paid largest sums of money year after year after year. Remember, Denny Hamlin's rookie season in Cup was in 2006 when money was aplenty from race teams to be able to pay their drivers. It was not a who can bring sponsorship. It was who's going to put my car in victory lane and which sponsor is going to sponsor me and not really care about the driver. That's the old way of doing business, but obviously Hamlin, having been around as long as he has, is kind of grandfathered in, so Gibbs is paying him $14 million a year, which obviously helped get 2311 up off the ground, but that's not exactly what Hamlin is arguing. He's saying he shouldn't have to invest his own money into that, especially given the way the sport is now. So he also testified, Hamlin testified on day 2, that he pitched the concept of 2311 when he was doing that pitch to Michael Jordan and other investors. He projected a 10% return on investment. Now, NASCAR is countering that and saying, well, if you're saying you projected a 10% return on investment, the amount that you're suing us for is about a 900% return on investment. So NASCAR's lawyer kind of getting a little bit quippy there. Again, you're going to keep seeing this. One side says one thing, the other side is going to retort and have a response or a counterclaim, and that's what the jury is going to hear, and the judge is going to make that decision. So definitely interesting to note there. Meanwhile, according to testimony, 2311 Racing is reportedly valued at $160.2 million just 4 years after its debut in the NASCAR Cup Series. So a big change. I mean, going from basically a team that's just started to now being worth over $150 million is definitely something to look at, and I think something that possibly the jury will take into account when they eventually make their ruling, whenever that is. Now, on day 3 of the trial, Bob Jenkins, who again is the owner of Front Row Motorsports, it's important to note, this is not the Bob Jenkins who was, the IMSPA announcer who passed away in 2021. This is totally different. This is Bob Jenkins, who's been running Front Row Motorsports. He's a franchisee of several Yum brands, so KFC, Long John Silver's, Taco Bell, things like that. Of course, he also testified during the trial that his sons now own do primarily the most of that franchising. But he still, again, confirmed what has been known for many years, is that when FRM doesn't have a sponsor on the car, he puts one of his franchises on the car. So Taco Bell, Long John Silver's, KFC. Usually it's been Long John Silver's lately. But when you see a Long John Silver's car or a Taco Bell car or a KFC car on one of those FRM cars, it's not actually being funded. That is a placeholder so that they're not running a blank car, basically. They're not getting any payment from Taco Bell, KFC, Long John Silver's, any of those Yum brands. It's just Bob Jenkins is allowed to put those on his car because technically he's a franchisee, which means he has the rights to do so. That's why you see that. But what's interesting here is that it was revealed to the court that FRM is worth $60.9 million. So compare that to the $160.2 million that FRM is worth. You could clearly see Bob Jenkins is a little bit more, has a lot more to lose, I think, in this trial, which probably, according to at least Jeff Gluck, he tweeted that NASCAR took many shots at Bob Jenkins. I'm quoting from Jeff Gluck, quote, "NASCAR took many shots at Bob Jenkins, and it didn't seem to go well at all. The jury appeared to dislike the line of questioning, and Jenkins came off as a sympathetic figure in Gluck's opinion." So that's from Jeff Gluck specifically. That I am reading off a tweet that he posted after day 3 of the trial had wrapped up. Now, also Bob Jenkins during his testimony revealed that he has never made money since he's owned since he's owned Front Row Motorsports. Bob Jenkins has never made a profit. He's never made any profit, so he's explicitly in racing for the love of the game. And so again, interesting to note there. Finally, Front Row Motorsports financial data was revealed. We don't really have a lot of we have financial data from 2311, but we don't have the level of detail that we got from FRM. And number one, that was very interesting, that said they charged Matt Tifft in 2019. He was contracted to pay the team $2.1 million for his cup ride in 2019, which, again, he fulfilled all but the last, I want to say, 6 or 7 races until he had that seizure that's kept him out of NASCAR. At least according to NASCAR, he won't be eligible to come back until 2031 based on his their medical provisions. Again, having seizures can affect your ability to drive, or, the big concern is that you would have a seizure while driving. And obviously, if you're epileptic or know somebody who's epileptic, this is a very common thing to deal with. There's a certain amount of time you can and can't drive after a seizure. And when your next seizure, once your last seizure happens, you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can drive next. So obviously, Tifft isn't probably going to be cleared for NASCAR for a while. But despite that, he was contracted to pay Front Row Motorsports $2.1 million for his cup ride in 2019. Meanwhile, we learned that Chandler Smith was contracted to pay $1.5, so $1.5 million just to race in the Truck Series last year, just to get that second truck open for FRM. Because remember, they basically got sponsorship for Lane Riggs. Lane Riggs isn't bringing in much money, but Chandler Smith essentially paid $1.5 million in order to race the Truck Series last year. And then also we found out that Ford paid the team $1.175 million last season. So that's how much Front Row Motorsports at least was getting last year, and then how much Matt Tifft was contracted to pay them in 2019. So definitely some interesting things going on. Again, it's only day 3. We'll find out more on day 4 and on day 5, and possibly as this trial continues on into next week. Again, stick it right here with the Racing Report, because we'll have the latest up-to-date news and notes on the trial. Every week that we have a new episode, we'll have the latest news and notes from that. So thanks again for listening to that. Let's go ahead and move on into some happier NASCAR news today. Kaulig Racing has announced that Ty Dillon will return to the team in 2026 to again drive the number 10 Chevrolet. Seabay will return as a primary sponsor for Dillon. Meanwhile, Jenna Fryer tweeted this during a recess of the trial today, that she confirmed that Chris Gabehart has left Joe Gibbs Racing. This was a big shock to most people within the NASCAR paddock, myself included. I don't think really any of us saw this coming, but he, remember, has just recently served as the director of competition for Joe Gibbs Racing, and rumors, unconfirmed rumors, take this with a grain of salt, unconfirmed rumors say that he might be landing a role with Spire Motorsports, though I'm not exactly certain what that role would be if it ends up being true. Meanwhile, some news in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, formerly known as the Xfinity Series. Cope Family Racing has partnered with Stanton Barrett Motorsports. Remember Stanton Barrett, the old Hollywood stuntman who used to race NASCAR in the mid-2000s? Actually had a full-time ride there for Roush Racing in the then Busch Series before the sponsorship fell through. But Stanton Barrett, he's come back. He's partnered with Cope Family Racing to field the number 30 Chevrolet beginning next season in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Don't know who's going to drive the car, don't know what the sponsors are yet, but we know that much. Also in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, we know that Josh Bilicki is going to race full-time for SS Greenlight Racing in the number 07 Chevrolet next season. Good news for Josh Bilicki, definitely a ride that he deserves, a full-time ride for him. He's been very impressive in what he's had. Remember, he's had a couple of starts for Joe Gibbs Racing, impressed in those starts, so definitely good news there for him. And now finally in the Truck Series, some Truck Series news. Nice Motorsports says Connor Jones will share the number 42 Chevrolet in the Truck Series beginning next season with Tyler Reif, as well as a multitude of other drivers. So we at least know that two of those drivers who are going to be racing in the 42 truck next season, but we don't know who the other drivers are or how many more races they still need to fill. All right, that is it for this week's NASCAR news. Let's go ahead and take our second break of the show, and when we come back, we'll get you ready, everything you need to know from the Qatar Grand Prix and what's going on now in Abu Dhabi coming up this weekend, and we'll break down all of the reaction and everything that happened in the Adelaide Grand Final for the Supercars. So again, don't go anywhere. You are watching The Racing Report. And welcome back to The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks so much for sticking with us through that break. Boy, let me tell you something. The Qatar Grand Prix this weekend in Formula One, not one of the more exciting races, but it did have a championship battle that kept myself and maybe most other people entertained with it, because in what appeared to be a very simple McLaren domination win, looked like Lando Norris, at least from the start, Lando Norris was on the path to win his first ever Formula One championship, clinching it in Qatar, until a lap 8 safety car for Nico Hülkenberg came out, and the entire field, except for the two McLarens, decided to pit. So now the McLarens were on basically their strategy that they started the race on, whereas the entire rest of the field was in the perfect opportunity to undercut them by going in and pitting first. Now remember, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Pirelli did mandate 25 lap stints for the Qatar Grand Prix, and that played into it. Obviously, tire degradation was indeed a big factor, because when McLaren finally did make their first pit stop long after Verstappen did, let's just say Max's fresher tires, when the McLaren's tires were starting to wear, they proved the dividend. And Max Verstappen jumped Oscar Piastri for the lead and never looked back. And that was all she wrote, basically, from that moment on. But Lando Norris very well could have finished fifth until Kimi Antonelli, in the waning laps, basically screwed up the last sector and allowed Norris to get by him and earn the crucial 2 extra points that I think is going to be really, really key, depending on how the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix goes. Because here's what happens. Norris now leads Verstappen by 12 points and Piastri by 16 heading into Abu Dhabi. So that is a very, very tight margin. But all that Norris has to do in order to clinch the championship, if Verstappen or Piastri wins, as long as Lando finishes third in the race, he is the Formula One world champion. If he finishes any lower than that and Verstappen or Piastri win the race, it could get a lot tighter. Now, I think Verstappen winning the race and Norris finishing fourth would give Verstappen the title. I'd have to go back and do some of the math on where Piastri would have to fit, where Lando would have to finish if Piastri were to win the race. But either way, you're not going to want to miss the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix coming up this weekend. And also, I want to give a shout out to Carlos Sainz getting a podium for Williams at Qatar. Great job for him. Very happy to see that, especially given everything that's happened to him in the last year or so. But like I said, won't want to miss this weekend's race in Abu Dhabi. Now, let's talk about some of the Supercars news and notes from this past week. Goodness gracious, we have a new champion, and his name is Chaz Mostert. But here's the thing that happened. So, Mostert had a great final series. No doubt about it. Incredible final series. But in the last race, on the Sunday race, or the Saturday night race if you're in the United States, Brock Feeney took the green flag, or the lights went out, race starts, turn 6, lap 1. He's turned by Mostert's teammate, Ryan Wood, goes all the way back to the field, and then he was still dealing with an engine issue that he was encountering the day before. Mind you, he did win the race the day before, so he did win the second out of the third races at the Adelaide Grand Final, but that engine problem continued in the third race, and that dropped him to ultimately finishing 20th, and Chaz Mostert walks away with the championship. Now, here's the controversy behind that. Now, it's important to note that Brock Feeney won 13 races and scored 17 poles. Mostert won just 4 races and scored 1 pole. So if you're talking about one driver who was clearly miles above the class of the field in Brock Feeney not winning the title, he was noticeably and understandably devastated after that race, though a lot of fans were just happy to see Mostert be crowned the champion, excuse me. But that's not to say that it wasn't an exciting race. It obviously was. But again, as I predicted, this is what happens when you have playoffs in motorsports. They create these situations where the dominant driver all season has one thing go wrong in the final race, and that determines the outcome of their whole season. You can win 13 races and score 17 poles, which, by the way, is a series record. Brock Feeney broke the series record, 17 poles this season, with 17 poles this season, and he has basically nothing to show for it. He doesn't even get second in the championship. In fact, he fell all the way to third in the championship behind teammate and defending champion until this past weekend, Will Brown. So a lot of things to discuss there in the Supercars world, and it's getting understandably a mixed reaction. Some fans are saying this is great, this is better than NASCAR's, we're fine with this. Other fans are saying this is not right, this is not how you determine a champion, and I'm of the opinion of the latter. If you really want to ask my opinion, I've been very outspoken for a while that the way to crown a champion in motorsports is through a season-long points standings, just because of the vast differences that motorsports has compared to stick and ball sports, and just because you're racing everybody else at the same time every single race. But again, the excitement, I can't deny that it did create for a very exciting race. Now, the event, I should say, in race 1, it was rain shortened, but it was a fun race when it was raining and before things kind of went off the rails there. But Brody Kostecki won that race. Then Brock Feeney, like I said, won race 2. And then Matt Payne finished it off, finishing ahead of Chaz Mostert to win that race, while Mostert went on to win the title again. And I just want to real quick give a big old shout out, because Austin Cindric had one heck of a weekend. He was thrown into the fire there with his first ever Supercars start. Austin Cindric was, because of the rain. So as we talked about, Cindric was going down there racing a one-off with the Tickford Racing team in the number 5. We talked about that. And it was very, very cool to see him race there. But he ultimately finished 23rd, and 21st in the Adelaide Grand Final, which I think some people could say is maybe not that great. But ultimately, hey, he was running at the end of all 3 races. So congratulations to Austin Cindric getting to live out a dream. All right, we've gone quite long on this week's show, and I apologize. I know. It's a long one, but hey, let's go ahead and take a look at what races are coming up this weekend. We've got, like I said, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix coming up for Formula One, finishing up the season, a three-way title battle. Definitely is going to be a lot of fun. We talked about Leonardo Fornoli winning the F2 championship, but there's still one race left, or excuse me, two races, one round left for the Formula 2 season before they officially finish their championship for the season. And then while the F1 and F2 seasons come to a close, the Formula E season begins coming up this weekend in Sao Paulo. Now, you can watch that race beginning at noon on the Roku channel for free. It is airing for free. So if you have the Roku channel, you don't have to have a Roku smart TV. You can just install the app on your phone or any other participating television. It works on my Fire TV. I can get it. But that is available to you. You can watch the race live and free coming up from Sao Paulo for the Sao Paulo E-Prix. That is this Saturday, December 6th at noon Eastern time. So if you're a fan of any kind of racing and don't mind if it's electric, there you go, and we'll talk about it coming up here next week on the Racing Report. So thank you again so much to everybody who tuned in this weekend. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And again, if you like this show, make sure you are following me on social media, because I will be retweeting all of the great journalists that are covering the NASCAR antitrust trial, the Bob Pockris, Matt Weaver, Jeff Gluck, Kelly Crandall, John Newby, Michael Massey, all of the front stretch guys. Can't give a bigger shout out enough to those guys for what they're doing right now in the courtroom and devoting so much of their time to covering this trial. So we'll keep you updated on that. But for WTHR Plus, my name is Rob Peeters, and this has been another episode of The Racing Report.